in a long time that both the audio failed and GoToWebinar failed. I've never had that happen. And I have just logged off and started again, and we should be ready to go. And I will record it for the people who were patient enough to wait 10 minutes. I can't believe this has happened. It's been so long since I've had this problem. So welcome, I'm Barry Rosen. Thank you for sitting through our technical difficulties. I guess Mercury and Saturn are still connected. Let me do a sound check again. Afi, can you hear me? Okay. Afi, I'm doing a sound check. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. And did you hear anything I said before?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you not hear me? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've lost a bunch of people because of the computer problems, but I'll record it and we'll send it to them. I do apologize to everybody. Again, for those of you who stuck around, again, I do apologize. I'm just kind of surprised that we've had this level of complication. It's not happened for a long time. So again, let's pray to Ganesh again. Welcome to Secrets of the Transit. This is our first class. I'm Barry Rosen. I've been involved in Vedic astrology since 1988. I've been teaching Vedic astrology classes for since 2016 online. And today we're going to actually have a real first lesson on Vedic astrology and transits. And for those of you who missed the live performance, we will then be having a tape recording that will be sent to you. And I do apologize that we had problems with the live performance. Okay. I usually start out by doing some Vedic chanting, and given that we've had some problems this morning, I'm going to start out with some prayers to Ganesh here. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha. Vakritunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprapa, Nirvigam Kurame Deva, Sarvakarisha Sarvada. Dhyanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Padam, Mokshamula Guru Kripa. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Vrichoma Amritam Gamaya, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvina Vatitamastu Ma Vivishai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Samaye Mangalai Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukrashini Vischa Rahave Kitave Namaha. Honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedavyasa, my spiritual tradition, and all my great Jyotish teachers. Okay, so welcome to our first real class. It's kind of like the first day of college. You have to kind of give an overview of what you're going to do, but you also have to kind of give real material. And so I actually give a lot of material in the first classes, and as well as an overview of what we're going to do for this class. And for those of you who don't know me, I've been teaching Vedic astrology since 2016 online. Many of you know me from my newsletter and my columns. And one of my specialties is transits. I actually learned Vedic astrology from studying transits and watching their impact on my life over 30 years. And as a result, I've gotten very adept at kind of subtle insights into the stars. In fact, I've just kind of added a class now on the psychological and emotional impact of transits, because I think what happens is the mind has a lot of mental noise and a lot of emotional noise, and we don't know if it's ours or if it's the interference of the planets. It's usually some combination. And if we can sort it out, we can kind of transcend it and cut the puppet strings. I kind of think sometimes when we don't know Vedic astrology and we don't know what's going on in the stars, it's kind of like, you know, there's some kind of puppeteer who's pulling our strings. Our anger levels go up, our fear levels go up, our sadness levels go up, our depression goes up, and we just think we blame ourselves or we blame other people in our lives. And usually it's just the play and display of the planets interacting with our chart. And the more we understand that, the more we can kind of transcend it and cut the puppet strings and be much clearer about what's going on in our lives. And, you know, ultimately astrology should bring us to kind of a deeper spiritual state. We have people signed up for the class. The class is actually going to start in 2 weeks on June the 10th. I'm actually very organized. This is like a surprise. I was just like, as I said, I went to church, I came back, I had it all set up, and suddenly the computer didn't work, and I haven't had that experience for a while. So for those of you who have taken my classes with me, and they'll talk about them, my classes are very organized. I have an exalted Saturn, and I tend to be technically proficient in getting everything working well, and just it's kind of surprised that came out of the blue, so I'm just not going to get too absorbed in it. So let's get to some knowledge. Anyway, the class will start in 2 weeks. We'll meet on Saturdays. There'll be 12 live classes and a few pre-recorded classes when I'm traveling, and it will be very good. Afi here is one of my students, and she will be just going to help us moderate a little bit later on. I will take some time for questions. I tend to kind of, on these preview classes, I tend to kind of lecture a lot, and then I tend to pause. And there will be times where I'll pause for questions. And you also save your questions toward the end. We'll probably try to go about an hour and a half today. I'm sorry for the late start. I think you'll learn some material today. Okay. So here's my contact information. You can reach me at Barry. Actually, this is now Barry 2 at Applied Vedic Astrology. I don't think you need my cell number. I'm very reachable by email, and I'm on. You can also text me on Facebook text. I don't see them as quickly. But let's start with some knowledge, okay? So transits are a core way to start learning astrology, which is why I have a lot of newer students in the class. And the more astrology, this astrology is kind of like an ocean. The more you know, the more you don't know. And for my advanced students, there will be a lot of advanced material to learn also. And the nature of astrology is that it's kind of like morning dew on your flowers. By the time the sun comes out, it evaporates. So you have to kind of keep refreshing your brain and studying it to kind of keep it fresh. And one of the reasons I teach, which is my absolute favorite thing, is because it also kind of helps me to refresh my brain and such. I feel that transits are kind of a fundamental foundation. As I said, I've watched transits for 30 years every day, and as part of my work as a financial astrologer to see how I felt, how the markets reacted to the transits. And I gained a lot of key insights over 30 years, just understanding the aspects, the conjunctions, all the interactions. And so we'll talk about that a little bit today. So the class will have readings and bonus videos. This is version 2.0. I taught this class last in 2019. Often I will send the previous version of the videotape to study, and then there'll be new material that will add on to that. And as always, the more you put into studying Vedic astrology, the more you get out of it. Transits, again, are also a great way to learn natal charts. And for example, this next couple of weeks, we have Jupiter and Rahu tightly conjunct, and which is kind of rare. It happens every 14 years. You know, it's a big event in the skies. You know, there's some positive qualities to it. Jupiter amplifies Rahu and makes it stronger, and Rahu, you know, governs kind of technology. You can see how NASDAQ has just been taking off lately, and everybody, we have another .com bubble happening with everybody wanting to buy AI stocks because they think that it's the next huge thing that will change the world. And, you know, as we saw in the .com bubble, these things don't always last. But, you know, so if you find a Jupiter-Rahu conjunction in somebody's chart and you've observed it in transit, you kind of understand it better, because sometimes you don't get to experience it, but we all get to experience it, you know, when it happens in transit. So that's one reason I think, you know, transits and watching the daily transits are very important, and it's what I've made a study of. And again, as I said earlier, I think transits, one of the key values of astrology is that it can save the mind, because the mind, you know, tends to be an emotional puddle sometimes. It tends to have excessive thinking, it gets angry. And you know, if you're like me and most people, when you have an emotional outburst and you feel you kind of regret it, you get into a fight, you regret it. And I think, you know, you can, you know, I call it astro weather. I think it's nice to know the weekly astro weather to see, to make sure you don't get in a fight with your spouse, to make sure that if you have a choice in making going to a job interview this week or next week, you decide that maybe the astrology is better next week. There's a lot of practical things we can do with our astro weather, and I keep it in the back of my mind all the time, and I know certain days are just better than other days, and it's important to kind of know your power days and to know when to kind of lie low. I don't think, there's some people, and I even have friends who are afraid to go out of the house when there are really bad transits hitting their chart, and you know, we can't live our life that way. We can't be Chicken Little, and we can't hide from the stars, and the stars are always our friend. We have to kind of really understand what's going on. At the same time, you know, we look for the good weather forecast, but you don't plan a picnic when there's a tornado watch, you know, so, you know, you have to kind of, it's good to know what's going on. And transits sometimes also kind of come in clusters, because, you know, Sun, Venus, and Mercury kind of go through the signs of the zodiac pretty much together. Mercury is very close to the sun, and Venus is usually there with it. It's just because of the way the sky is set up. You know, so when we get our 11th house transits, you know, we get gains and things happen, and we fulfill our desires. And if we get too cocky and we don't save money during that time, then we get all kinds of 12th house transits and unexpected expenses and losses and all kinds of crazy things happening. So, you know, you can always, it's good, you can plan your calendar around these things. For me, my 12th house transits always come usually around October 15th and November 15th. And I know, you know, after all these years of watching that, I kind of just don't plan a lot of important things during that time. It's not my time. It's a time, you know, sun going through your 12th house makes you kind of hidden and unseen. It's very funny. I used to go to this astrology conference, and the lady knew her astrology, and she always scheduled it on her birthday, and her birthday was in November when I had sun in the 12th house. I remember going to the conference and sitting at the table and nobody saw me. You know, it was kind of like, it was great for her because it was her birthday and the sun was shining on her conference and her life, and she was empowered. And I was having my 12th house transit, and just like no one came up to my table, you know. So it's kind of nice to understand those things and to kind of be able to work with them. So it's nice to know that when you have your 6th house transits, you've got to be more disciplined about your health and your exercise. And when you've got your 8th house transits, you know, you have to be prepared for delays and surprises and things like that. So it's good to kind of plan the year and have a map like that. Now, the important thing is that people don't always understand is that transits are triggers for your larger cycles and doshas, and they're really only 20% of prediction. We write about them in the column because it's something generally we can write about that can apply to everybody because your charts are very individual. If you're in a Jupiter period and you're having a bad Saturn transit, it may not really impact you that much. If you're in a Saturn period and you're having a bad Saturn period, it's going to impact you a whole lot more. So the dasha, the underlying cycle, is always more important than the transit. But you know, everything happens kind of on a microscopic level, and we have this kind of background energy going on in our dashas and our larger transits with Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, and Jupiter. And then the short-term transits of the moon kind of trigger short-term events, and Mercury, Venus, and the Sun kind of trigger, you know, maybe events that last 2, 3, 4 weeks. And it's important to kind of be able to kind of you understand the transits because they do kind of trigger major events, and we can learn a lot by understanding how that happens. There are also very many advanced principles to learn. I think, you know, one of the things that happens when I do these courses, sometimes I just realize we need to do this and we need to do this, or I have a whole, you know, 5 years later after teaching this course, it's 4 years later actually, I'm starting to kind of see astrology in a different way, and I just realized I need to kind of reintroduce some new things. And so I have a bunch of, for those of you who've taken my transit class before, I probably have 5 or 6 new lessons coming, and some of the lessons that I have taught before you can listen to on the old video as prep, and then I'm going to add a bunch of new material. The thing about life is, you know, sometimes we feel like the stars are out to get us, and that was never meant to be the case. The planets are all your friends. Even Saturn is the bad high school coach who makes you run harder so that when you get the gold medal, you're like kissing him and hugging him, even though you want to punch him every time he kind of screams at you. And Saturn's like that. He has a purpose. And we have to understand what he's doing in our life and teaching responsibility and hard work and being and keeping things going over the long haul and being patient. And that's, you know, and it's a malefic, but he really wants us to win. You know, Mars is, you know, teaches us courage, you know, and gives us energy. And yeah, you know, when when our ego's too strong, when we get caught up in anger, it can cause accidents and stuff like that. But you know, in the end, you know, Mars has a purpose too, and Rahu and Ketu, of course, have a purpose too. As the other malefics, Rahu teaches us that all the wonder or gains of status and material life can be quickly taken away from us, and Ketu reminds us that we're here to find God, and it takes the material away from us sometimes to remind us that we're here for a bigger purpose. So you know, we always have to keep everything that's happening in perspective. I mean, I think part of what I want to teach in this class is what are the positive lessons, you know, that all the transits are teaching us. I mean, what are we not aware of? I mean, the transits kind of bring up certain patterns for us to explore in our life. And, you know, sometimes people kind of wait for, when my Saturn period ends, my life will be better. You know, when my Rahu period ends, everything will be wonderful. You know, and it's not always like that. Dashas are also very complicated. I'm going to teach an advanced dasha class soon, and they're very complex and multifaceted. And you know, like who promised you that you were going to live a life on the beach sipping cocktails? You know, I mean, people who are spiritual, people who are interested in astrology, often have tough lessons, and the malefics help bring them out. And you know, once in a while you meet people that, you know, have inherited a lot of money and who are drunk on the beach every day and spending, you know, their life in bed with another woman every night. And you know, you talk to them deeply at a vacation, and you know, their lives are pretty empty. So you know, as hard as our lessons are sometimes, you know, they are making us stronger individuals, and our purpose of life is to grow towards more happiness. So we have to do our spiritual practices, and they kind of take care of the bumps, and being aware of what's going on in the sky also helps us be aware of what's going on. I mean, I just was having all these weird thoughts this week about gurus, and I was reading, you know, those awful stories about the Dalai Lama, and you know, and people were, you know, putting him down for some cultural misunderstanding that he made to a child, and it's the type of thing that comes up with the Rahu-Jupiter conjunction. And if you don't know that that's what's causing it, I mean, first of all, we should always honor our gurus. It's actually, it's very, and it goes to honor our teachers in grade school and everything. It's in Indian culture, it's considered the most important thing is to honor your teachers. And our society tends not to honor teachers and priests and gurus and things like that. And the media, which we know is just filled with all kinds of hate and scandal and gossip, just wants to go out of their way to kind of, you know, create tittle to you know, get more readers. But in the end, we always have to kind of be aware. So anyway, the point I'm making is that, you know, this Rahu-Jupiter conjunction, I'm noticing people writing and, you know, knocking their gurus, and you know, we just saw that with the Dalai Lama and things like that. And it's, if you don't know what's going on with the Rahu-Jupiter conjunction, you kind of might think, you know, you might get caught up in that. And I've just seen that happen in my community, and it's never a good thing to do. It's not a good thing to do. So we have to be aware of what's going on in the stars, so we don't get caught up in bad behavior. And sometimes things are just kind of overwhelming. Rahu can be obsessive. It will take over, and you know, unless you have enough spiritual practice, and unless you don't know what's going on, you get Rahu hitting a key part of your chart. I mean, you're just obsessed beyond belief with something, and it's important to understand that. We have a whole lesson on Rahu and Ketu transits you know, later on. You know, astrology is there to kind of help soothe our intellect and answer core questions as to why we are suffering, and that's helpful. And Mercury-dominated people and air signs who, you know, are particularly asking the question why. You know, if you have Mercury in the first house, or you have Gemini or Virgo rising, you know, you're a why person. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And you know, that can be a technique. It's, you know, asking another question incessantly kind of eventually pulls us out of our bliss because the mind gets overactive. But for Mercury people in particular, you know, there are ways to kind of understand the experiences of the world and then transcend it through the knowledge. And this is kind of a jnana technique in the Vedas for transcending the mind of the world. And Jyotish kind of has that role. It allows us to see what's happening in the world, happening in the stars, how it's impacting us, and integrate that experience and then transcend it to a deeper level. You know, and different signs of the zodiac need different things. And actually, it's for those of you who practice astrology, you need to kind of remember that when you do charts. Water signs, you know, are feeling people, their intuition. They want to know why they're feeling this way because the stars are kind of creating things. I'm a Scorpio rising, I'm a water sign, and I tend to feel the planets, and I tend to feel what's going on, and I want to know what's going on and why I'm feeling some way, and that's important to me. Earth signs, you know, Virgo, whenever I do a Virgo chart, if I don't give them practical remedies and predictions and something concrete in the world, they're very practical, you know, they're not interested in spirituality and emotions and stuff like that. So it's very different. We'll go over this later. I did put together this for my astrology students. You know, different rising signs need different need to be under, you know, we need to do astrology different for different rising signs, and it's kind of fascinating. And we'll go over that sometime maybe later in the course. I don't think it's relevant for today. Transits, we have transits in the sky, and when Saturn goes retrograde, everybody feels more fearful, but it's not like everybody feels more anxious and more suffering and problems come out. But it also obviously that doesn't happen to everybody. First of all, the dosh is important. If you're in a Saturn period and Saturn goes retrograde, it's more impactful. If Saturn's going retrograde over your moon, you're all familiar with Sadi Sat, then it's the depression and the real difficult energies kick in. We'll have a whole lesson on Saturn transits. But people are different, so we actually also have to learn how to read the transits to our natal chart, how they interact with other planets in our chart. So there's kind of two things. There's the general weather, which I've kind of specialized in because I have to write about it, and then there's how the planets are interacting at your chart. For example, this year Saturn is going to go stationary retrograde at about 11 or 12 Aquarius, and it's going to be there for about 3 months. So when it goes stationary retrograde, it's more powerful. So if you have a key planet, particularly like your moon or Mercury or your ascendant or even your sun or something, Saturn spending that much time on top of you is going to have an impact. And during a lifetime, there's always 4 or 5 times that happens, and it seems like the end of the world because it just goes on for months sometimes. Sometimes it can be Rahu, which is also a slow-moving planet, going over a key planet. And so we have to know, we're going to learn in the class how the transits interact with our natal chart and how to look for those key kind of transits to watch out for. So when we do transits, Rahu and Ketu are always so important. They spend 18 minutes in a sign and 9 months in a nakshatra. And Rahu, even though most people don't know this, has a 30-degree aspect to the next sign. So it really has kind of a 36-month impact when it changes signs, because it may finally get out of Aries, in late September, early October, or maybe as late as November, depending on mean node or true node. We'll talk about that. But it's still going to be, when it goes into Pisces, it still will be aspecting Aries. So it's kind of like we never quite get rid of Rahu. We have to remember Rahu is kind of like a 3-year influence. Saturn is Saturn is in a sign for 2.5 years, and it spends 1 year in each nakshatra. And we'll be studying Saturn in a whole lesson, because Saturn transits are always huge. Jupiter, 12 months in a sign. Retrograde planets, we got Mars goes retrograde for 5 months every 2 years. Mercury, 60 to 63 days every 3 times a year. And it's interesting, Mercury kind of rotates through groups. This year, Mercury is going retrograde in the fire sign. It went retrograde in Aries. Just recently, it's direct now. It'll go retrograde in Leo in August, and then it'll go retrograde in Sagittarius. So every 7 years, we have a rotation into different signs of the zodiac for Mercury retrograde, and it's something we can actually pay attention to. Venus goes retrograde every 2 months, for about 2 months every 2 years, and so next Venus retrograde is this year, July 23rd to September 2nd, and it'll be at 4 degrees Leo and then go retrograde into Cancer. Now the interesting thing about Venus retrograde is, and even Jupiter retrograde, is that I didn't put down Jupiter here, but retrograde benefics are more powerful to do good, and they're only really a problem when they get too close to the sun, and that's combustion, which we'll also study. And even a retrograde Venus does not have combust problems, actually, and same thing with Mercury. So those are kind of advanced rules that people don't always understand. But if the planet is retrograde, like Venus or Mercury, and it's too close to the sun, it actually is not negatively impacted. If it's direct and combust, it is impacted, and it's a much more difficult situation. But in general, Venus retrogrades and Jupiter retrogrades are, they have their quirky energies that we'll learn about, but they're generally more positive. And retrograde malefics are more damaging. Saturn, every year, Saturn goes retrograde, and it's doing it in the July 17th this year into September, like October, I forgot the exact date. And it always makes life a little bit harder. There's more anxiety, there's more suffering, there's more pain, there's more delays, and it's always good to plan your life and get more stuff done before Saturn gets retrograde. Same thing with Jupiter retrograde. It tends to be bad for marketing. It's a planet of expansion. Jupiter will go retrograde late this year on September 2nd until December 30th. And I always tell people, get your marketing in place, because when Jupiter goes retrograde, marketing always gets delayed. I know this every year, and if I haven't really prepared my marketing campaigns way ahead of time and gotten it all in place before Jupiter goes retrograde, it seems like I'm finding my way out of a box trying to get anything done. So this is how understanding transits is very practical. How do we plan our marketing? How do we plan our vacation schedule? If you read my article the other day about this, the summer transits, Mars, it's, a lot of people do go on vacation in June, and this year Mars is in Cancer, which means there's not a lot of energy, and it's very funny. I mean, if you're going on a vacation where you're resting and you just have a camper by the beach, or you're going on a long meditation retreat, great, do it when Mars is debilitated. That's exactly what you want to do. A lot of people get more tired from their vacations. You go to 10 cities in Europe in 14 days, and when they come home, they need 3 weeks to rest. You don't want to plan a vacation when Mars is debilitated if you want that kind of fun and excitement running around, unless you have unbounded energy. So there's kind of a lot of practical things we can learn. I probably, I have specialized in mundane astrology. I'm not teaching very much of it in this course, but we do need to understand the larger transits to plot the future of countries and companies and things like that. And it's a fascinating area. Someday I may teach it again. I got bored with it, more so because it's not like you can change anything. And like, you want to, anytime you predict disaster and it happens, I mean, are you a hero? No, you can't prevent any of these things from happening. I mean, so it's a real problem. I'm kind of thinking I'm probably going to add a lesson which is not in the original course on moon transits, because they happen every day into another nakshatra, every 2.5 days into a new sign, and understanding how they impact with the other planets is important for our emotional sanity. Probably when I do the next lesson on emotional and psychological impact of the planets, I think we'll probably spend at least 45 minutes on the moon, because it's so important. But when we have so many transits, how do we filter them out? And I'll go over that in a minute. You have to decide what are the key planets for your rising sign. What's the you want to look at the transits of the ascendant lord, because that's the most important thing for you. And we have to understand the difference from doing transits from the moon and doing transits from the ascendant. And they're both important. I've been blessed because I have moon in the first house, so I've never had to worry about it, but you do have to understand the differences and how to work with that. We also, studying transits is also a kind of a guide, not a guide, it's kind of it allows us to get ready for more advanced astrology like Muhurta and Prashna. Muhurta is the science of finding a good chart when somebody wants to get married, or somebody wants to move into a home, or somebody wants to start a new business. And you really have to understand transits well and the interactions of the planets to kind of plan that. And that's, so this transit class is definitely, I have taught a little Muhurta before. I do practice it. I think it's a wonderful way to overcome our karma and our destiny sometimes. But you really, it's very hard to find these good days, and you really have to kind of understand transits really well. And then Prashna, of course, is which I don't teach and I don't do very much. Is the whole science of answering a question in the moment, and that is based on what the transits are now, but it depends how the rising sign comes up, and there are other factors that you look at. But transits also help us understand Muhurta and Prashna. So those of you who are taking my class, we do have people signed up. I do send the PowerPoints ahead of time for you to study. I will be sending the version 1.0 tapes for you to watch ahead of time, and it will be, it often takes a second viewing of material to get Jyotish. Vedic astrology sometimes, whenever I learn new things, it's not until I practice on my chart and go over a second time that I get it. And I recommend that. So I try to give you a lot of material ahead of time, and certainly we want to practice on your own personal charts. And I'm going to be one of the things I do with my students is I ask for their chart data if they want to give it, and then we use examples of everything that we learn on their chart so that it becomes personally relevant. I do start on time, and this was the first time in years that I did start on time, and it was just such a surprise because I thought I could walk in, and I start promptly on time all the time. Those of you, and I always kind of make jokes about, I say, oh, it's 12 o'clock, we have to start. Saturn wants us to be punctual. If you need to kind of master Saturn in your chart, you have to really be on time for everything that you do. That's one of the rules. Okay. I do like South Indian style more than North India. I can't put both charts up for people who need North Indian. And I'll go over why I like South India. It's a lot easier to see a lot of things better. Software, if you don't have Vedic astrology software, you can get Jagannatha Hora for free online. It's really actually one of the best programs. I don't think it's that user friendly. I personally use Sri Jyotistar. A lot of people use Parashara's Light. For transits, any of these programs are fine. I will give my students to sign up for the course Vedic astrological almanacs and Vedic astrology ephemerises, which are very hard to find. I have some. Unfortunately, they're in Sanskrit, so you can, if you want to know transits into Leo, you have to know that it's going to say Simha or S-I-M. So, but it's important to learn the Vedic names for the planets and the signs, and I will give those. And one of the reasons I'm able to do a lot of transits, easily and look ahead easily, because I have these kind of rare Vedic astrological ephemerises that allow me to, look out 5 years, look out at the whole year very quickly, and I don't have to kind of run the computer program. So those of you taking the class will get those as a bonus. Okay, recommended books. I always like Bill Levicy's Beneath the Vedic Sky. It's kind of a Bible. It's one of the clearer books available on Vedic astrology if you don't own it. It is out of print, but you can find it on Amazon in a used edition. My books are very powerful. Finding Your Blind Spots Using Vedic Astrology. I have a 3rd edition out. Came out last year, and I'm very excited about that book. The 2019-2020 Transit Guide. I will probably give that to my students. I've written copious articles on rules for transits in the guide, and I will have you read them ahead of time, and it gives you a lot of written material to study. And then my other my other signs of life from the astrological zodiac, those are all available on my website or on Amazon if you like hard copies. Again, no one makes any money from books. I've made pennies from many of these books. So if you need, I'm not pushing my books to make money. I'm pushing them because, you know, it's how I teach people. And a couple other books that are useful to have for transits are Robert Hand's book, Planets and Aspects, and Planet in Transit. It's a Western astrological book, but he's very good at all the various combinations, including the outer planets. And a rare book that you can find on Amazon, Reinhold Ebertein's Combination of Stellar Influences, really shows you about clusters. And actually, Kapil Rajan now has a good book on conjunctions now too. I should probably add that. But although we need reference books because we can't keep you know, everything in our head. Let's see. So my cookbook for doing transits, I give out these kind of cookbooks, you know, to make life easy. You know, if you is generally follow the transits for the ascendant lord, and if you're ruled by Aquarius, you have to look at Rahu. If you're ruled by Scorpio, you have to look at the co-ruler Ketu. And the transits of the ascendant lord will be the most key thing you can do for anybody or for your own life. How is the ascendant lord being afflicted in transit? Is it going over a difficult natal planet in your chart like Saturn or Ketu? Is it, you know, getting aspected by Jupiter through a transit in your natal chart? So, you know, you always want to kind of, that's very key for doing your personal transits. You know, again, transits are ephemeral. I mean, you know, some good influence may last 2 or 3 days. Some good influence may last for a long time if it's a Jupiter transit. Some bad influence may last for too long, like a Rahu or Saturn transit. So in any case, it's good to understand it, but we can't, people get into this whole thing about, woe is me, Saturn's in my 4th house, and I'm just depressed. You know, well, what are you going to do about it? You know, there are mantras, you can do meditation, you can do yoga, you can get more exercise, you can get so strong enough that you can just tell Saturn to go, because, you know, you don't need to be depressed, you know, and it's a reality for people, but there are always remedies for everything. Awareness is the first remedy, which is why we study Vedic astrology. Other basic points that we always look at when we do transits is, are they interacting with other natal planets, malefic or benefics in transit? So, you know, I'm ruled by Mars, and Mars is in Cancer. So I know, and I'm feeling low energy. I know I can't run around like a crazy person this month, even though I can't always stop my schedule. But, you know, we have, when Mars goes into Leo, Saturn's in Aquarius, we'll have a Mars-Saturn opposition in the middle of July. And that's always intense. It means there's a lot of frustration in getting things done. There's a lot of indecision. There's a lot of anxiety. And so you kind of have to plan for that. And then you have to decide, how is it impacting your chart? Well, it's my 10th house, so that may be around work for me. But if it's your 4th house, you know, it may be around getting home repairs done, or auto repairs done, or issues with your mother. So, you know, we can predict all that stuff. And the whole point of it is not to be a victim, but to kind of like plan your schedule. I mean, you can plan your whole year out. You can just, you know, just say, okay, I'm ruled by Venus. Venus is exalted in February and March this year. It's debilitated in September. You know, I'm gonna have you know, I can get a lot done, you know, during my Venus exaltation, and when Venus is in Taurus a few months later, and if it goes into Virgo, I better plan that vacation or that spiritual retreat. So, you know, we need to learn how to plan our long-term planning, and that's how I think Vedic astrology can be very practical, and I'm very practical for those who know my work. And then we'll do some advanced work in lesson 15 on Ashtaka Varga, which is how the energy points hit different places in your chart. They're called Bindu points. And sometimes if we have too few Bindu points, the planet may be weaker. So if you're going through a Saturn transit, and it's a difficult one, you have 1 Bindu point in Aquarius. It's a more difficult Saturn transit if you have 4 Bindu points for Aquarius, which is above average. Then it may not be as severe, and it may not bother you at all. So there are all kinds of advanced things with transits that we need to learn. And Ashtaka Varga is one of them, and there are other things. The other thing I like to do with transits is we always have to keep the transit of the Dasha Lord in the back of our mind, particularly if it's like a Saturn period or a Rahu period. And because the whole year may be impacted. Let's say you're in a Saturn period and Saturn's going through your 12th house, and Saturn's not very well disposed in your natal chart. It's a year of loss and frustration expenditures, and if you don't kind of plan ahead, you're going to be in trouble, and you have to kind of remember, this is coming up. You're going to save a lot of extra money in the bank and not go on and spend it on that extra vacation or that luxury car because you know that your 12th house Saturn period is coming up. So we can also look at the subperiod lords and the Atmakarka, and we'll talk about that at some point. I talked about this a little bit. The malefics are actually good guys because they kick us in the butt like the good athletic coach, and they help us get our act together. But we have to understand what they're doing, and even in transit, they often are doing that. And so we have to understand what they're teaching us in terms of what planets they're interacting it, what houses they're going through, if there's a double-edged sword in the Dasha and the transit happening at the same time. Benefics, are more fun. I mean, everybody loves Venus, everybody loves fun, everybody loves, more cheesecake, but ultimately benefics, they make us lazy or indulgent in the senses. And so we also have to remember that sometimes people go through a Jupiter period and it's not a good, they're Taurus rising or Jupiter goes through Taurus and they're Taurus rising, they get fat, they eat too much, they overspend, so you have to kind of even know how the benefics get out of balance in transit and how that may impact you, because they can cause just as many problems as the malefics. Malefics never feel good, Saturn never feels good. I mean, but it can produce good results, particularly for Taurus and Libra rising, for Capricorn rising and Aquarius rising. They're really, it's the planet. So it's never fun, but it can produce good results. Let's see. We also have to remember that planets have positive and negative sides, and Bill Levesey brings this out very well in his book. And for the most part, we get more negatives. In our natal charts, if you have a perfectly placed planet that's unafflicted, it's some great yoga and it's some talent that you're there to give to the world. Inevitably, when you study Vedic astrology, there's always something wrong. It's debilitated in Navamsha, it's conjunct Saturn and or something in some settled Varga chart. Inevitably, we don't want to dwell on the negative. At the same time, we incarnate because we have things to learn, and so we have to kind of get a reminder of the planet's positive and negative sides. We have to understand that the negative side isn't necessarily negative. What are we here to learn? I mean, think of Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, one of my favorite movies. It's like, he goes through so many nightmares of waking up in the same bed, in the same town, on the same day, until he gets it right. And he eventually does get it right by the end of the movie. He's this great human being, and he was totally a mess at the end of the movie. And our lives are like that. We're here to get to the end of our journey and to get things right. We're here to be kind. We're here to give love. We're here to let go of our ego when we need to. I mean, there's so many core lessons whenever these planets are acting up, and we have to be aware of what they are. And people who meditate and people who study astrology have an edge. Most people are just puppets, and the puppet master pulls the strings and they react, For those of you who are taking the class, I sent you the slideshow. One of the problems with Vedic astrology, I say it's like 1,000 shades of gray. I mean, we get blacks and whites once in a while. Maybe you get Saturn and Aries in the 12th house afflicted by Mars and Rahu. which is an unusual thing to happen. And there's nothing positive you can say about it. I mean, there are some positives you can say about it. And the person has really difficult karma to work out if they go through a Saturn period or if they go through Saturn and Aries transit. But most of the time, we get 1,000 shades of gray, and Vedic astrology is learning to see it's got this Jupiter aspect, but it's got this Saturn aspect, but it's got a trine from Rahu, and it's at the same degree as Ketu, so we have to kind of learn to kind of differentiate the shades of gray. We do get black and white sometimes, but most of the time we have to understand the shades of gray. And the way you understand the shades of gray is you watch the transits every day, and you watch how you feel, and you watch what happens in your life, and you're aware of what's going on in the sky and how it's interacting with your chart, and then that's how you learn. And then eventually you get to know how to kind of make better decisions and not make the same mistakes like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day. So it's important to kind of learn from our mistakes. And I hate to say this sometimes, whenever I look at Vedic astrology, I never find a perfect planet. And once in a while I do, but there's always some aspect to it, or it's in a nakshatra that's difficult, or it's in a pada of the nakshatra that's difficult. And like I said, life isn't perfect. There are always flaws. And I think if we can understand what's happening, we can learn our lessons, and so we don't have to repeat them. And sometimes there are kind of advanced things that people don't pay attention to. This is also true for natal charts and in transits. It's, I call it landlords and tenants. The ruler of the house is like the landlord, and the planets going through the house are like the tenant. Sometimes the landlord, I love this analogy. It's kind of like, if you're renting and your landlord lives in Ukraine and you're trying to get a hold of him to get something fixed, it just doesn't happen very easily, and you get very frustrated. It's kind of like you may have Mars in Aries or something like very strong, but if let's say if you have let's say you have Mars in Taurus, and Venus is in debilitated in Virgo, or Venus is in Aries in the 12th house. If the dispositor is far away, then it can't take care of its property, and so we have to kind of understand. We get these things like that. I get charts, and people kind of wonder, well, why isn't this happening for me? They've got an exalted sun, but Mars, the lord of the chart, is in Cancer, so it immediately is weak. That it can't give its full energy to Aries. Or if you look in the D9 chart and it's debilitated in the Navamsha or something like that, there are all these kind of subtleties that you have to be aware of, because there's always like 1,000 shades of gray. Sometimes you get a transit through a positive nakshatra. So like Pusha nakshatra is the most auspicious nakshatra. It's in Cancer, 3 degrees, 20 minutes, to 1640. And it's very good for grace and connections to spiritual teachers because it's ruled by Brihaspati. But, if you get Saturn doesn't like being in there. It had, the mythology suggests that it had a war with the Vedic priests. And so, if, or if Saturn isn't, if Saturn, the ruler of that nakshatra, is in Aries with Mars, that nakshatra just isn't functioning well. So there's all these kind of subtle ways that Vedic astrology is like reading strands of DNA sometimes. Aspects. Now, we have a whole lesson on aspects, but I'm going to actually send you my videotape lesson for you to kind of study ahead on. And people don't always even understand aspects very well. Aspects, there are two types of aspects. For the transit course, we're going to talk about what are called Graha Drishti, which are aspects that most of you know, Jupiter aspects, 5, 7, and 9 from itself, and Saturn aspects 3, 3, 7, and 10 from itself. Those type of Mars 4, 7, 8. So those are the aspects that we're kind of familiar with, and those are important for transits. The Rashi Drishti aspects, which we learn in Jaimini astrology, are more natal chart aspects, which means we have them our whole life. If they're in the chart, they're important for our whole life. The Graha Drishti aspects, which are the ones that most of you are familiar with, those kind of, those ebb in and out. I mean, if you have a Jupiter trine, an auspicious Jupiter trine in your chart to the sun, when it happens in transit, it's triggered because you have it in your chart. If you don't have it in your chart, it may not mean a whole lot when it happens in transit. But anyway, aspects are connected to our desire level. Venus shows what we love or desire and what we wish to love to possess. Mercury aspects provide information, reconnaissance to provide information and learning about something. Jupiter aspects show all the good karma we have done and remind us that we should continue to do charity and service and philanthropy in life to create new karma for the future. Sun aspects represent the desire of the soul for career, good fortune. They're not malefic, but the sun can be cruel, egotistical, or selfish at times when it's afflicted. Moon aspects are just desires of the mind for our family, home, other obsessions with the mind. Mars aspects represent our desire for conflict, power, ambition, property, siblings, and things like that. It's about fighting. Mars wants to fight, and sometimes there are things that are worth fighting for. I mean, we have a lot of people fighting for rights in America these days. It's probably a good thing for inequality. At the same time, you don't want to, people get into these petty fights on Facebook, and after a while, you've wasted all your energy, fighting. And sometimes you get Mars and Mercury conjunct in the sky, and you get into these huge fights with people. And if you hold on to it while you're driving, you get into an accident. So it's very important to kind of understand the nature of these aspects. We'll go through those on the tape again. There are all kinds of advanced things that, for those who are interested in advanced things, that we will need to learn. I'm going to do more transits of the moon in this class than I've done before. I may do transits to the Aruda Lagna, which are very important. The Aruda Lagna represents how people see us. It's actually the most important thing for predicting manifestation. I think we're going to have some material on that. And we have 3 lessons on nakshatra transits, and what's called Navatara. You can time things incredibly well through transits through key nakshatras, and that's very important. Major rule of Vedic astrology is dashas are 80% and transits are 20%. So I get people writing me all the time because I write these transit columns, and they say, oh, do I have to worry about this? Da, 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 da. I said, no, you're in a Jupiter period. You're not going to, this is not interacting with your natal chart. Ignore it. It's going to be a little bump. You might feel a little bump. But if you have a bad transit on a natal chart position during a difficult dasha, then it's like a major event. I'll give you an example. I was in a Mars-Mercury period in 2005 or something like that, and Mars and Mercury were conjunct in transit. Now, Mars and Mercury tend to cause accidents, particularly for me, because Mercury owns the 8th house, and Mars often causes accidents anyway. So the dasha was running. It was Mars-Mercury. The transit was Mars-Mercury conjunction. I told my wife, and this is the only time I've ever done this, I said, honey, I'm not driving today. I'm just going to stay home. I don't really, I just know this is too strong a combination. And it was a Wednesday when Mercury would cause accidents. So, I looked at very subtle things. And so my wife was leaving the house, and she comes in, and I'm on the phone, and she says, "Are you in the driveway?" And she doesn't hear very well sometimes. And I said I was, and she didn't hear me. And my car was in the driveway, and she backed out of the garage, quickly because she was in a hurry, and she didn't see my car in the driveway. Most people will look for a car in the driveway when they back up, but my wife totaled, she didn't total both our cars, but we had $2,500 damage on both our cars with that Mars Mercury conjunction and Mars Mercury period. And could I have prevented it? I tried. Sometimes, things have to get worked out. Of course, she came in, it was my fault. It's kind of a funny lesson, but the bottom line with that lesson is we don't have to worry about many transits and really difficult transits unless they're hitting key natal points in our chart, or we're going through a dasha period that's also emphasizing them. And we'll have to have an integration lesson on that at some point. The other thing that we have to understand about transits is repeat signatures. If you have a signature in your chart, when it happens in transit, it triggers it. So if you were born with a Saturn K2 conjunction, which is a very difficult transit to be born with, it tends to create things falling apart all the time, depending on what house is it in, what the rising sign is. But in general, we say things fall apart. K2 wants to take away, Saturn causes suffering and problems. Anyway, it also can take away a lot. So Saturn K2 conjunction in your chart can be very difficult. If it happens in transit, which doesn't happen very often, maybe every 15, every 18, 19 years, something like that. It doesn't happen that often. When it happens in transit, if you have a natal signature in your chart, then you have to be particularly wary of it. Same thing like this Rahu Jupiter thing. Now, I am noticing the energies of it. I'm noticing how it impacts my thought. I don't really have it in my natal chart, so it's not really affecting me in a big way. For some people, it's a huge thing, and I'm watching some of my friends just go into tirades and about things that they wouldn't normally do. We're always looking at different combinations, how transits are connected to our dashas, how transits are connected to our natal chart, and how what natal chart signatures we have, and are those transits repeating in transit. And then we have to look at kind of what I call the general astro weather. And I think I always feel the astro weather, which is why I can write about it. Not all of you may do that. I have moon in the first house, but I always feel everything that's happening in the sky. And because of that, I'm able to really kind of remember, why am I feeling this way? Well, sometimes I miss things. I mean, I don't spend my life charting what's happening in my chart anymore. I just live life and do my meditation. But and I think all of you should do that. But it's nice to kind of, sometimes I'll have some weird energy up and I haven't noticed it, and then I'll look and say, oh my God, we have an 8th house aspect of Mars to my natal K2 or something like that. And it's just good to kind of know how to kind of translate that stuff, because it kind of saves your psychology. Or again, if you do your astro weather for the year, you can kind of like say, not a good time to ask for a raise, not a good time to go on vacation. It's just good planning. Something I think we need to do that I haven't done in the previous course is moon transits, understanding full and new moons. And I'm going to toss that in there. I don't have it on the syllabus, but I think it's really important. And I have some articles on it in my almanac. Eclipses are always really important. People get too afraid of eclipses. The key rule is if they hit a key planet with 1 or 2 degrees and you're in a Rahu or K2 period, Rahu Sun, K2 Moon, K2 Sun, K2 Moon, Rahu Moon, something like that, then it could have a big impact. But for it to be like a huge thing in your life where you have a big downfall or some major event happens, you're going to have some extreme combination of dashas and transits and key natal points. So the thing is, this is why we shouldn't be afraid of the stars. Now, there are a couple times in our life that some huge event happens, and it is some combination of the dasha and the transit and the natal chart signatures. And, it's good to understand this so that we can predict them for people. For the most part, we don't have too many of those happening in our lives. And when they do happen, they're earth shattering and they affect us for years. I had, there's a year that I had 10 kidney stones, and, I didn't understand astrology then. It was Saturn transiting through Libra. Libra governs kidneys. I have my natal Saturn there. There was some other natal chart. I was in a period for health issues. I think Mercury, Venus or something. Venus governs kidneys, Mercury's 8th house. But it was a very devastating year, and it was very predictable, and I certainly understand it, and it changed my life in many ways and how I became more health conscious. But it was that type of signature that was just very rare, and we don't get too many of those. It's good to know of them, but we can't spend our lives fearing the planets. We can't be a Chicken Little and afraid to go out in the skies. We also kind of are going to have a lesson on our daily building blocks. I'll give you a little of that now as a preview. One of the most important things we can understand are rulers of the day. Sunday rules spirituality. The sun is divine. It's a good day to go to church. Saturday rules work, right? Saturday's a good day to wash the car and clean the house. Venus governs relationships and having fun. Friday night is when we go out and have a date. Now, if you mix these up, if you do your date nights on Saturday, it doesn't mean you shouldn't have fun, but you may not have as successful a date. It's nice to work with the energy of the Lord of the day. Jupiter is a day of the guru and of learning. It's a good day to have a Jyotish class. Originally, we were scheduled to have this class on Thursday. Now we've moved it to Saturday, which is one of my best days of the week to teach anyway, when people are off for the weekend. We have to understand the daily nakshatra transits of the moon. They're very important for coloring, and we'll learn that with Navatara too, the transits of through the stars. And then the lunar days, which are called tithis, and the H is silent. And there are all these kind of special yogas if you have a combination of the lunar day and the nakshatra and the day of the week in a certain sequence. They create these powerful yogas, and I've been following them every day now for a couple years now, and they're really kind of very powerful for foretelling whether it's a black day or a white day. It's kind of interesting, and I decided to teach those in this class for my advanced students to learn these kind of special yogas, and they're very important for Muhurta. But you can, if you know, and the computers actually calculate them now too. If you get Sri Jyoti Star 10, they can really, and there are books I can give you that you can look them up quickly. I spend 5 minutes a week looking them up for the stock market. It helps me pick the better days for trading markets and understanding negative and positive days for the stock market. But I also noticed that when having a really different, if there's a bad yoga going on, which is a combination of the nakshatra and the day of the week, that it's good. So that's kind of an advanced thing that we'll learn in this class. But like I said, it's good to understand daily chart astrology too. There's a thing called Rahukalam, which is the hour that Rahu dominates. There's every hour there's a ruler of the hour, and the computer programs will kind of teach you it, and you can actually look them up. But you can't live your life trying to to do stuff. But you need, from Muhurta, sometimes you need to know this. But I learned this all the hard way, is that if something really difficult is going to happen on a day because you have a bad transit and a bad dasha, and it's a difficult day of the week for you, it often happens in the Rahukalam period of the day, which is an hour and a half that happens every day. And it's kind of fascinating thing to know. It's dependent on sunrise and daylight savings time. So if we have a 6 a.m. sunrise, which happens, March 21st and September 21st or something like that, then, the Rehuklam period would be as follows. But you have to adjust it for sunrise and daylight time. And so there are computer programs that do this real easily. But sometimes it's good to know. You don't want to kind of schedule an important meeting during a Rahukalam period, or like, especially if you've got other bad things going on that day. So again, we can't live our life being Chicken Little. On the other hand, when you have like important job interviews, or you have to start a trip, or you have to buy, you have an airline ticket that, you have to pick a time, do you want to buy it during, a difficult day of the week for you, when there's a bad yoga and the Rehuklam period is operating, you're going to get canceled. I've watched this, it happens. So it's like, there are ways to use this on a practical level. Scheduling is just, Jupiter and Venus days, Thursday and Friday, are generally more auspicious because they're benefic days for getting good things done and scheduling things. Mars is not considered a good day for doing things unless, you're ruled by Mars, or, you do it afternoon. There's all these kind of rules in Muhurta that are important to understand. We'll go over those again. There's lots of stuff. And I don't want to keep you too long. I'm actually sometimes running out of steam, and I want to take some time for questions and take a break, and also have some of my students share a little bit. So I'm going to unmute you all. Sometimes people have trouble using GoToWebinar. It's not like Zoom. I'm going to unmute you all, and if you look under, but you should find your name someplace on the panel, and there'll be an orange mic there, and you have to unmute it and turn the orange mic green. And I've unmuted you all so that you can do it. I can also you can put questions in the chat box. I find it a little bit harder to do, but it may be the only way you can communicate. And while you're thinking of questions, or trying to find a way to turn your mic on, I'm going to have Affy, who's one of my students, speak for a minute and share her experience with my classes. Affy, did you want to get on? I think I've got you.
Yes, of course, Barry. Thank you. This was a good overview of what you're going to teach in the class and some specifics that you've given. I've been a student of Barry for, I'm trying to calculate, since 2016, really. And he is a thoughtful teacher. Not only does he have a world of experience and knowledge about as a Jyotishi, about Vedic astrology, but the way he communicates it is very clear, concise, and there's also a kindness to Barry. He really cares about his students individually and about their learning and spiritual growth. That's very important. I've taken numerous classes. I've learned so much from Barry. When I started, with Barry, I was still a kind of a beginner student, even though that I had been studying for many years. But since having Barry as a teacher since 2016, I've been, when I do charts and do predictions, people are amazed. And a lot of that, I have gratitude to Barry for teaching me a lot of that. So you are actually very lucky to have an opportunity to have a live class. That way he, during the class, he also looks at your chart, and you can have practical experiences as well. And, that's why I continue taking his classes. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Affy. That was great. Renee, did you want to share anything? I think I can unmute you. I don't want to put you on the spot. If you don't, that's okay. Renee just is a new student who just finished my Secrets of the Sun class. Um, let's see.
Hi.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay, let me try it again. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, Renee.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm a new student at Barry's. I just took the first class about the sun and career recently. And as a new student, even though I was kind of at a beginner level of knowledge, there's just an immense amount of information that Barry provides in the slides that are given. A lot of times when taking these classes, beta classes in the past, I found sometimes the slides are fairly bare bones and you don't have a lot to go back on. But there's a wealth of information provided in the materials that Barry gives out that is amazing. So I really can't say enough good things about taking the class. As Afi said, is methodical in the approach and how he presents the information.
Okay, thank you, Renee. That was very kind. Anybody have any questions? So the class actually, this is the first class. It's kind of like the first day of college. We have to get certain, give you an overview and give you some basic points, which are important, like, you know, transits are 20% and doshes are 80%. It's this kind of core to understanding. So we got through a lot of those points today. The next live class will be on June 10th. I think I'm going to start at noon. I think I've listed 11, but I'm going to start at noon. I'll give you a little bit more time. And that's 10 o'clock Pacific. If you, there's a $50 discount. The class is $295, which is very inexpensive for, it ends up being like about $20 a class, even at the full price. I have a $50 discount if you sign up by May 30th on the website. I do understand sometimes people need a payment program. They have a budget. Most people do their payment program through their own personal credit cards, which is more ideal. If you do need a payment program, you know, I can set up a 3 payment plan for you on PayPal, and you can email if you need that. Again, I don't do this for a lot of money. I mean, I wish I could make more money doing it because it's that which I love most. I do it because, you know, it's my passion, and it's just the thing that makes me happiest. I mean, luckily I earn much of my money predicting the financial markets with my financial newsletters, but this is something I just have to do because it makes me happy, and it's my life purpose. So any other questions? I don't ever like questions on people's personal charts, but if you have general questions about transits or anything that I've said, you know, please, you are all unmuted, and you can, if you can find your mic, you can just click on it and turn it green. If you can't find your mic, which is not always easy, and go to webinar, you can type it into the question box. Or the,
Hi, what about like yogi points and lucky points? Are we going to be talking about that in the class?
I usually teach that in my Money Karma class. I certainly could bring that into the Panchanga lesson. Usually, I can definitely bring that in. The punch.
Okay.
I've had articles I've published on it, you know, and I can send them to you. They are connected to the Panchanga, so when we have the lesson on Panchanga, we can definitely bring those up.
Talk about it. Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, other questions? I'm glad you found your mic. You can also type in the chat box, but I'll keep looking at your questions. Okay. So it's Sunday, it's Memorial Day weekend. I'm sure many of you have many things to do. And thank you for joining me live today. And I'm sorry for the late start. I just, you know, if you ask anybody in my class, I mean, I'm there early. I have everything working. and I start punctually on time at 12. And I mean, I think once in the last 5 or 6 years, I had some disaster where the internet went out and I had to go onto my hotspot or something like that happened. But I've been very lucky with technology, luckily until today. So it's very funny, but I don't think it means anything. Saturn and Mercury are still playing games together, I guess. I don't know if you've been watching, you've read my column. I mean, Saturn has a 60-degree aspect to Mercury, and it's gone on way too long. If you've had those type of problems, you understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so again, you can contact me at barry2@appliedvedicastrology.com. You'll get a copy of this video if you want to rewatch it, and a link to signing up for the course. When that video is sent, it comes from GoToWebinar. Sometimes it goes in the spam filter, so you can look for it. And we'll probably try to send something out also. But love to have you in my class again. If you sign up, I will send you 4 pre-recorded videos to watch between now and the next time we meet on exalted planets, debilitated planets, retrograde planets, and combust planets, and planetary aspects. Those are kind of core material. A lot of you know that material. I'm going to use the old lessons of those because they're well done. And then I just have added, 3 new lessons that I want to do. And so we can probably have a session where we go over that material, but you can watch it on your own. It's very powerful, and we'll give you lots of time to work on that. Okay. So looking forward to working with you. The class is definitely happening. I've had a number of people sign up already. And again, it's the first live class will be Saturday, June the 10th at noon. That class, the course will end either August 12th or August 19th, depending on July 4th weekend and whether, we have a lot of people going on vacation or something like that. But I'll have 12 live classes, and I'll give you a number, probably more like 5 pre-recorded sessions, if not more, where we'll, have extra material to study. Okay, thank you again for being here. Any final questions, thoughts? You can always send me an email. Looking forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Barry.
Thanks,
Thank
Yaffe.
you.